Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Money in Motion. I'm your host, Jordan Maxwell, a qualified financial planner based here in London. Now, if it's your first time here, just want to set the tone. What this series isn't is a deep dive into the latest investment trends or pretending there's some secret sauce to building long-term wealth. The whole point of this is simple: to help you build better money behaviors, to make smarter financial decisions, and actually move forward step by step toward a stronger financial future. Each episode is designed to be short, straight to the point, and give you something practical you can reflect on or act on immediately. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Okay, so let's get into today's episode. And for today's episode, I want to give you something a bit more practical. Less theory, less psychology, and more of something that you can go away and implement today. Okay, because let's face it, most people don't struggle with knowing what they should be doing with money. If you ask someone off the street, what's good financial behavior or what's a good financial habit? Most people will say the same thing. They'll say, I need to save more, I need to spend less, I need to invest consistently, blah, blah, blah. It's, people typically know what they should be doing. It's not exactly groundbreaking, but I think the main issue is they don't then do it, and then they don't do it consistently. And that's where the subject of today's episode comes in. And that subject is automation. Because if you can remove the need to constantly make financial decisions, if you can, let's say, set things up once and then let the good habits run quietly in the background, you're giving yourself a massive advantage than if you weren't to do it. So today I want to walk you through 3 things that you can put on autopilot today that can genuinely help to fast track your finances over time. Okay, so let's kick off with number 1, and that is automating your financial foundation. Now, this one is probably the least exciting, but honestly, it's the most important, because typically everyone wants to jump straight to investing. Okay, that's the more exciting subject, right? They want to grow wealth. They want to make those phenomenal returns that they've read about or their friends told them about. But the truth is, if your foundations are shaky, then every financial setback will feel a lot bigger than it needs to. Okay, so before anything else, you want to automate stability. And this could be something like building an emergency fund. Typical rule of thumb, 3 to 6 months worth of outgoings. You want to make sure that your essential bills are covered. Again, if you can set this up automatically, that's better. And what we're going for here is you want to create a bit of financial breathing room, a bit of financial headspace, because what I've found is financial stress a lot of the time, it comes from a position of uncertainty, a place of uncertainty, not knowing whether one unexpected expense, right, one curveball financially is going to throw everything else off. It's a big house of cards. But when you've got a system that's quietly building that buffer, that foundation in the background, believe me, you will think differently. You make calmer decisions, you make better decisions. Now, the key here is being consistent, however. Okay, and that's where most people fall. So setting up automatic transfers the day you get paid, even if it's a modest amount, right? It could be £20, £50, £100, whatever's realistic for you right now. That's what you want to do. Okay, because once it becomes automatic, you then stop relying on motivation, right? You stop relying on self-discipline. And over time, those small increments starts building up that safety net, and it becomes a real source of confidence. So the first thing you want to automate is that financial foundation. Let's jump into number 2. And that is paying yourself first. Now, once the foundations are building or built, this is where momentum really starts to kick in. And the idea is pretty simple, right? Before you spend money on anything else, what you want to do is you want to allocate a portion. This could be a set amount, or this could be a set percentage. You want to allocate that portion towards your future self. This could be in the form of savings, investments is even better, long-term goals is even better. And again, you want to do this automatically. Set this up for autopilot, because most people will do this whole sequence backwards, right? What usually happens is money comes in, so you get paid your salary, let's say, and then life happens, right? You might pay your basic stuff like your rent or your mortgage or your bills or whatever, but the bulk of the money, hopefully the bulk, is spent on quote unquote life, right? Going out with friends, going out to restaurants. I've got to pay back mum and dad, all this stuff. And then we try to save what's left, or we try to invest what's left after that, which, let's be honest, usually isn't much. So instead, you want to flip that process, right? So the moment your salary, your income lands, what you want to do, similar to the first step, is you want to automate a set percentage or a set amount, monetary amount, to automatically move into savings, investments, a completely third pot. And you want to do this before you've had the chance to touch it. That's the key point here. And again, this matters because it removes the emotion. It removes that reliance on discipline from the equation. You're not debating with yourself each month. You're not waiting for that moment to feel disciplined where this actually starts to click. You do this once and the system handles it for you. And something interesting will happen when you do this consistently. What you find is your lifestyle will start to adjust around what remains. So remember, in this case, you get paid. Step 2 is pay yourself first, right? Pay yourself next, rather. And then you spend what's left on quote unquote life. And your life will adjust around whatever's left. Not around your total income, not around that big number that fell into your bank when your salary was paid. And this is the huge shift, because it stops things like lifestyle creep, which I mentioned in a previous episode and broke down what that is in a previous episode. It stops something like that from quietly consuming every part of your income, because typically you'll get paid, maybe you get a pay rise, maybe you get paid a bonus. And then if the majority of that is being spent on quote unquote life, naturally that life is going to be better. You go to nicer restaurants, you go on more holidays, etc. And what's left doesn't change, right? But if you flip it the other way around, you set yourself up so that a set percentage goes out into savings or into investments. Well, if you've got a pay rise or you've got a bonus, it just means that percentage is bigger. So you're paying yourself more when income increases. And that's what you want to do, okay? Because if that happens consistently, this becomes one of the biggest drivers of long-term wealth creation. Okay, it's not a massive one-off decision. It's just repeated, automated investing and saving that's quietly compounding in the background. So, number 2 thing to automate is paying yourself first. And last but not least, number 3, and I think this is one that's probably the most overlooked because it does require a little bit of discipline, is automating the habit of auditing your finances or auditing the system that you've created. Now, this is a bit dull compared to the others, granted, but this is what keeps everything working. Think of this as the lubricant or the grease for the gears, because what tends to happen is people will set up a good system. Maybe you'll do step 1 and you'll automate step 2, right? You've got good system set up. You've got some savings, you've got some direct debit, everything's kind of working in the background. But then because it's automated, you completely disengage. The mind switches off. And then months can pass, sometimes years can pass, and then everything slowly drifts. In that time, you'll get more money, maybe a pay rise, expenses. Everything will start to shift around you because that's what happens in life. But this one-time set-up system that you've created hasn't been amended to reflect those changes in life, and things start to drift. Like I say, spending increases, subscriptions, they'll pile up, goals change, incomes change, and the system just never gets reviewed. So when I say that you want to automate the audit of the finances, I don't mean, first of all, I don't mean that you need to obsessively check your accounts every day. Don't do that, right? Because that is counterproductive. That actually creates more anxiety than progress, because if you do that, you'll start reacting emotionally to short-term movements in things. You second guess yourself, and you'll ultimately begin interrupting the process. I was taught a very long time ago that managing your personal finances is like handling a bar of soap. The more you tamper with it, the more you touch it and play around with it, the smaller it typically gets, right? So keep that in mind. So instead of doing that, instead you want to set up or automate recurring check-ins, right? Maybe once a month, every 30 days, even better, once a quarter, even better, once every 6 months, right? Something that's scheduled, is in your calendar, and it becomes a routine. So when that time comes around, you sit down, you can ask yourself, what's worked since the last time? What's changed? And ultimately, is everything still moving in the right direction for me? And when you do it in this systemized way, there's no panic, there's no overreaction, it's just pure awareness. Because the goal isn't to constantly interfere with the process. Again, that's what typically happens if you're checking it every single day. Rather, it's to make sure that the process is still aligned with your life. And it's about getting that balance, right? You want to be hands-off enough for it to be consistent, but you want it to be engaged enough to avoid the drifting. That's why I think, every quarter, every 6 months is a good balance. Okay, so it's not every single day where you're going to feel the need to tamper with it because numbers fluctuate and stuff like that, particularly with investments. But also it's not so far away. It's not every 12 months or every, year and a half or something like that, where life has changed so much since the last time that you're completely starting from scratch every time. Right? So that's the third thing, is automate a set time that you can sit down and audit the process. Now, if we take a step back and we look at 1, 2, and 3 together, you'll see that they create something quite powerful. You may notice. The first is about stability. All right? Getting that foundation. Number 2, paying yourself first. What that does is it sets up for consistency and momentum. And then automating the audit process is all about awareness, making sure that whatever you set up is still good months, years into the future. And, to be completely frank, that combination alone, those 3, if you get them right, they will solve a huge number of your financial problems before they even appear. Believe me. Because I've said this plenty of times before. Wealth building is rarely about one dramatic action. Rather, it's usually the result of small systems repeated over and over and over again for a very long time. And the more of those systems you can automate, the better. So if you're listening to this today and you're thinking, right, Jordan, that's all well and good, but where do I begin? My advice would be, keep it simple. Don't overwhelm yourself. Set up one automatic transfer for next month. If you don't have a foundation or you don't have a solid enough foundation, let it go towards that. Whereas if you've got the foundation, let it go towards something like investing. You want to decide a percentage or a monetary value, and you want to start paying your future self each month. Okay? And finally, what you want to do, schedule one recurring financial check-in for yourself. Okay? So a day in the diary could be 30 days time. It could be 6 weeks time. Whenever it is, just a point in the future where you sit down and you say, right, I've set this up. How's it going? And just take it from there. And that's it. Again, start simple. Because once those systems are running, you'll stop relying on motivation, self-discipline, and you'll start relying on the structure. It'll give you that peace of mind of knowing you have these things working for you in the background. And that structure is what keeps people moving forward long after self-discipline and motivation fades away, right? Because it usually does. So key takeaway for today is good financial habits become much easier when you stop relying on memory and discipline, and you start building those systems that work with or without you, ideally without you having to think about them. Okay, they work a lot better when you can automate them. Okay, that's it for today. So if you found this useful, as usual, make sure you follow and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And if you know someone who could benefit from simplifying their finances via automation, share this with them. Okay, that's it for today, and I'll catch you in the next episode.